Hey, how are you doing there? Where'd my microphone go? There it is. Hi. Some of the earliest videos I did, I'm a Pali translator, by the way. That's the ancient dead language from Magadha Valley, circa 600 BCE. By the way, the oldest texts in India are written on the pillar edicts of King Ashok. Actually, that are found inside the Sanchi Top and other burial sites, funerary sites, and they're also too in Prakrit. They're written in Brahmi Prakrit along with the pillar edicts of King Ashok. It's the oldest language of what is today ancient India. It's not Sanskrit. Prakrit actually preceded Sanskrit. The interesting thing, and it's the reason why I have no interest in religions whatsoever, is because you have to suspend belief. Either a system is logical and tenable, or it's illogical and untenable. There's a great word everybody should learn, untenable. Kind of a fascinating word. Under the ancient Pali saying, Suvimutta cetasa nabanam, which translated means the thoroughly liberated spirit, or nous means nirvana. You could actually interpret the translation of nirvana, which in Pali is nibbana, two different ways. People are uncertain what the original is of these two, but they both mean the same thing. It could be from nisbandhu, which means freedom from bondage, yes, or nivriti, which is more likely, which means the subjugation or ending of perturbation, of becoming, like the Sanskrit saying, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, meaning the fruit or the end goal of yoga is the subjugation, nirodha, of perturbation, becoming. And of course this perturbation of becoming, or bhava nubhava, which means becoming and rebecoming, is due of course to primordial agnosis. The reason why the ancient, the people that are interested in ancient texts like the Upanishads, the Vedas, and the Nikayas of earliest Buddhism. And I hate to use the word Buddhism because that's actually a term that was invented in the 16th century. There's no Pali word for Buddhism, yeah? There was Buddha Sasana, doctrine of the Buddha, for example, in ancient Pali. But the one time he was asked in Samyutta Nikaya 5.4 what he taught, he said he taught Brahmayana, path to the absolute. The reason why people like Dr. Anandakitish Kumaraswamy, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, he was not only president of India for a while, but he was an extremely skilled author and translator. So interested in the Platonic texts is because they're exactly the same thing. Nothing is known except to the modality of the knower. These are all teaching one and the same thing. But getting back to the logical and untenable positions of what today is called Buddhism. And by the way, I'm going to quote Dr. Anandakitish Kumaraswamy, who famously said, Buddhism today is most famous for everything it originally never taught. And that's highly accurate, extremely accurate. This soul-denying nihilism. You either admit to what is outside of the psychophysical, yeah? What's outside of the psychophysical? Yeah? If there's nothing outside of the psychophysical, then what you have is a giant lump of nihilism and materialism. I'm only interested in what the original teaching said. And there are 17 proprietary declarations that are made about the spiritus sanctum, i.e. the nous, which in Pali is the word chit. Did you know that the 5 most primary important words in ancient Pali are the exact same words in ancient Egyptian? Aten and Aten, chit and chit. The list goes on and on. Isn't that fascinating? Also, too, one of the rock edicts of King Ashok, which was carved out on a rock edict, and there's a pillar edicts of King Ashok, from the 4th century CE, said the teachings of the Nikaya, or an ancient Brahmi Prakrit Panch Nikaya, which means 5 Nikayas, are being observed by King Ptolemy II in what we call ancient Egypt. So there's a huge back and forth between what was ancient India, of course India didn't exist back then, and ancient Egypt. All of this, of course, Pythagoras. I don't know if you know about Ammonia Saka, who was the teacher. There's a translation which I'm not going to give, because it's tenable. Ammonia Saka was the teacher of Plotinus. There's a Pythagorean, an Egyptian monist. There's the reason why there's a trifecta between ancient Greece, ancient Greek philosophical, monistic metaphysics and philosophy, ancient Egyptian monistic metaphysics and philosophy, Pythagoras, who spent who knows how much time in ancient Egypt, which we, of course, don't know. That, of course, along with ancient India. Anyway, these people like Radhakrishnan and Anandakirti Kumaraswamy, later in their lives, they realized, hey, this stuff is more pithy and it's the exact same thing in different words. We're huge, huge fans of Neoplatonic, Platonic monistic metaphysics, because it's the exact same thing you find in the Upanishads, the Vedas, and the ancient Nikayas. But if there's nothing outside of the psychophysical, like nothing outside of the radio, because people don't think, I can't use a radio analogy too much, but it's a nearly perfect analogy. You know, there's no signal in the radio. If there's nothing outside of the radio, which of course there is, a signal is everywhere and nowhere. We can't talk about the broadcast station. You know, the notion of liberation becomes untenable and impossible. It becomes completely illogical. When you talk about, and there's no disputation of this ancient Pali word vimutta, which means liberation. Yeah? There's no disputation that the word vimutta means liberation. There is disputation between the way these people translate the word amata, which means immortalis. A plus mata. Mata means death or mortality. Amata, of course, is immortalis, or immortality. They translate it as deathless, which is extremely grim and highly nihilistic. So if you actually have a soul, and have a soul, of course, is a really wrong saying, because that means one thing has something else. I have a rock in my hand. Well, it's my possession. One thing has another. So even saying having a soul is completely absurd, ridiculous, and untenable. But, you know, for sake of colloquialism and communication, we can say have a soul, but it's still incorrect. Without the pure subject, yes, there is no such thing as liberation. It becomes logical if you do posit something outside of the psychophysical. Otherwise, you're just talking about nihilism, and we're talking about that which is untenable. So you have liberation, but nothing attains liberation. That's right. And the way they try to explain it, importantly, contrary to doctrine, they say, well, it's like blowing out of a candle. You know, it's just like, shh, you just blow out a candle, shh, it's gone. It's like a fart in the wind. Who would want that? It would be better to suffer 1 million transmigrations and 1,000 mountains the size of Mount Everest, you know, to suffer becoming and rebecoming, than to try to enjoin something that, one, is impossible, number two, illogical, and number three, not that which is ever taught. I mean, who works for whose own good? Udana 81. There is, O followers. By the way, Bhikkhu doesn't mean monk. This whole monkdom stuff is like, there's a Buddhist monk over there. Yeah, the monk. The word bhikkhu, which is translated as monk by these people, and these are the people that are into the religion of it, because this was a liberation metaphysics based on disubjectification and removal of primordial agnosis. This is this whole religion, this whole circle of stupidity and ignorance, so on and so forth. It doesn't mean monk. Monk. The word comes from bhakti, which means to give. So the word bhikkhu, or bhikkhuni in the case of a female version, means devotee. You're devoted to something. You're devoted, of course, to wisdom and illumination. Word doesn't mean monk, by the way. There's no such thing as monks. It's a Buddhist monk. There's no such thing. Originally, anyway. There is now. It's like, shit, how can you deny it? I met some Buddhist monks. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I'm talking about originally. The word doesn't mean monk. I just had to mention that. So here we have sci-fi, which is short for psychophysical, and here we have psychophysical. So you could posit two things. You have nothing outside of the psychophysical, in which liberation is impossible. Nibbana becomes meaningless, and you're just positing materialistic nihilism. Or you have something that is ab extra to the psychophysical. Kind of like this radio would be the psychophysical. Radio has speakers on it. It has analog to digital converters. Has an antenna. By the way, the antenna in the human body is water. Yeah? Water. Water is the antenna that makes consciousness possible. Consciousness is the consubstantiality of matter and spirit. Yes? That is life, or zoe, Greek. Yeah? Consubstantiality thereof. Yeah? Here's the psychophysicals, the radios. We've got batteries, an antenna, analog to digital converters, a speaker, and here we have a broadcast, right? It comes out of the speaker. That's the broadcast. That's the interpolation of the signal. The broadcast is not to be confused with the signal. The broadcast goes no further than the radio and the speaker that blares it. Blah. But there is something ab extra to the radio and the antenna and all of this. You just smash it. Yeah, there's nothing here. There's no signal inside this radio. Who thinks that there's a signal in the radio? Who thinks that there's a real fire inside this this iMac I got going on here? The answer is there's not. Something ab extra to the psychophysical. Then it becomes tenable. Then it becomes logical. Then the word vimutta, i.e. liberation, becomes, of course, logical. As regarding liberation, yeah, there's no such thing as gold purification. We've talked about purifying gold. Well, sure they do. They purify gold. You ever seen a silver ore? It doesn't. You won't see silver in it 99 times out of 100. It looks like garbage. Yeah, it has to be smelted, and you have to bring the concentration levels up and up and up and up until you have pure silver, and you pour it out as a bullion, like 99.99% pure. Silver nor gold is ever purified. It is concentrated through extraction from. Yes, there's no such thing as purification of the soul. What is potential is not actual. We're talking about purification. Yeah? It's like talking about purifying gold or purifying the soul. It's like, well, what happens? You know? What is the signal unmodulated? Once again, getting back to the near-perfect radio analogy. A signal unmodulated is untunable. No antenna and no radio in the world. It's not even a signal by definition. It has no frequency or wavelength component. This is a near-perfect analogy for a vimutta. Modulation is due to the primordial agnosis, which causes embodiment, but it's not a cause because avidya is not a thing unto itself, neither is illumination. Illumination is the extrinsic attribute of the Absolute. Primordial agnosis, by the way, avidya, which is a privative plus vidya, meaning light, is no different than saying illumination, that which goes forth. The demiurge, the euristos dias, the ananker, the tolma of the agathon. Yes? So anyway, this is the illogical, untenable suspension of, I believe in liberation, some Buddhist might say. It's like, oh, you can't, and of course talk about is there not, asti, nasti. In the ancient Pali, is there or is there not? That's what those words mean, asti or nasti. Is there not? Is there not? And of course, this is mere discussion. This is logomachy, i.e. lip flapping. Yeah? So, how do you posit liberation without a liberant? How do you posit nibbana without a liberant? It becomes completely impossible. You have an untenable, illogical situation where you have nothing outside of the psychophysical. Yeah, well, it's just like a fart blowing out in the wind. He's like, it's like spiritually, and they use the word spiritually, even though they don't believe in a spirit, or something ab extra to the radio, if you will. It's like flushing yourself down the toilet into oblivion. That's it. It's the bliss of oblivion. It's a sort of nihilism. It's just nothing but materialistic nihilism. It's untenable. You can't talk about immortality, amata. You can't talk about liberation, vimutta, without something that is ab extra the psychophysical. Otherwise it becomes untenable and impossible. All you have is nihilism. When you deny the soul, nobody, by the way, goes looking, and you can't look for the soul. The soul is never an object, it is always pure subject. I'm speaking generally here. Nobody goes looking for that which they deny. There's no such thing as wisdom or illumination or transcendence if you deny something that is ab extra to the psychophysical. Well, it's about leading a good life, like being nice to your neighbors and petting your dog and, in engaging in sati, and they have no idea what the meaning of sati or samadhi are. Engaging in it, just going into oblivion. Emptiness, I'll talk about emptiness. Oh, really? You experienced emptiness? Yes, I did. Who experienced it? If you were in it, it wasn't empty. If you remember it, it's not empty, nor would it be empty by definition, because it would have to have some sort of attribute or nature by which it was not empty, that you knew that you were in it, but whereby which you can recall having been in it or connected to it, because it's self-contradictory. This is illogical, nonsensical rubbish. Liberation is impossible and meaningless and untenable without something ab extra to the psychophysical. These people are not critical thinkers. They're not. And, you know, this, I'm going to suspend disbelief on that. And what some people told me, it's about suspending disbelief. In this case, I'm talking about suspending a belief in something. It's like, I don't need to think about that. I'm going to join a group and shave my head and, well, you know, whatever makes you happy. What other people do or don't do is none of my business. I don't ever tell anybody what to do. I'm saying this is illogical, it's absurd, it's nihilistic, it's atomistic, it's materialistic. To them, Nibbana is literally like a cosmic, spiritual, although I can't say the word spiritual because they don't believe in the Spiritu Sancta or something ab extra, that you flush yourself down. You get flushed into belief. It's like blowing out a candle. This is actually what they do. Oh my goodness. I've had thousands of people over more than 2 decades email me. Used to write articles various places. Been writing articles since forever. It's like, oh, thank you. They'd write to me. You know, when I first looked at this stuff, I'd look at Buddhist websites, and they were talking about no soul, which is not doctrinally founded. The Dharmanada is neither a denial of the soul, nor does it support same. ABC, XYZ is not the soul. This is not the soul, that's not the soul, this isn't the soul. The fallacy of composition to say, well, this isn't the soul, and neither is that, and there's no soul. It's like, no, it's not what I said. This is common Indian metaphysical negative dialectic via negativa, not this, not that, not this, not that. The term is never used in a pejorative sense. Even the Dharmanada is used in Advaita Vedanta. There's nobody that follows Advaita Vedanta that thinks Advaita Vedanta teaches there is no soul, because the term anatman, Sanskrit word, same term, anatta, Pali, anatman, Sanskrit. There's nobody, not a single person on this earth that thinks that Advaita Vedanta teaches, well, there's no soul in Advaita. Nobody thinks that, even though they use the term anatman also. This is what happens when somebody understands things and comprehends things. People that are critical thinkers, well, this is just common neti-neti, because objective negation, this isn't the soul, that isn't the soul, neither. This is common via negativa. Objective negation leads to subjective synthesis. It's part of theurgy and apophaticism itself. Yes, it is objective self-sublimation for subjective, because there's always 2 selves. Greek, Indian, Egyptian, always 2 selves. Plato, 2 selves. The lower self, the higher self. The psychophysical self, the transcendent self. Direct analogy between consciousness and the radio, because consciousness goes no further than the radio. Consciousness is the consubstantiality of matter and spirit, yes? And the transcendent self, which would be analogous to the signal, which if I smash this radio, if I tear it apart, doesn't matter what I do to it. It doesn't affect the signal. Doesn't matter what I do to this radio. Yeah? Battery's dead. The radio breaks. It's the end of consciousness. Is what you're hearing out of that speaker is the interpolation of the signal, analog to digital converters, the speaker, yada, yada, yada. Consciousness is not the signal. It is not. It's interpolation of the signal by this. That consciousness is the psychophysical consciousness, which goes no further than the psychophysical, which is the lower self, the existential self. So, please see the difference. This is the reason why I say religion is secularized metaphysics. You take something that's noble and beautiful and you just cover it in poo and nonsense. You know, you take the neater parts of it and you dumb it down, you know, for materialists and nihilists. This is not original. I had somebody even here locally tell me, I'm a Buddhist. It's like, oh, really? Yeah. And I said, oh, and what's your position on the soul in Buddhist doctrine? Notice I said Buddhist doctrine. Buddhism taught that there was no soul. I said, oh, really? That's doctrinally unsubstantiated. Do you have any citation for this? Because I know it doesn't exist in the pre-sectarian corpus. By the way, the Nikayas is pre-sectarian. There's no such thing as the Pali Canon or a Tipitaka. Yeah, Tipitaka's notion of Abhidhamma and Vinaya. These are later sectarian garbage. It's kind of like saying, you know, the Catholic Church is part of Christianity. It's like, well, kind of, sort of, but not really. But, you know, all the nonsense taught by the Catholic Church has nothing to do with anything that's actually in the New Testament or was taught by the historical Jesus. I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic. Okay, well, Christianity is one thing. What they teach in the Catholic Church, you know, all the rites and you know, all the little trappings and stuff. Like it, don't care. That's not part of what the original was taught. The same is true here. This is just another fallacy of religions, secularized metaphysics. So there you go. You can't enjoin to the untenable and illogical. Talk about liberation without a liberant. You can't say there's nothing outside of the psychophysical, because liberation, amata, is untenable and illogical. It's impossible. Anyway, I hope I made that short, sweet, and succinct. If you like these videos, you want to email me, it's in the description below, or any donation is always warmly welcome. Thank you so very much. Have a wonderful week. Lux Veritas.